This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Here, Rabbi saying the Shabbosim after Pesach, the minhag in Klal Yisrael is to learn Pirkei Avos on Shabbos afternoon. So we're going to follow that minhag on Fridays to learn a little bit Pirkei Avos in the second session, like we've done in the past. And I want to begin with something that I found most interesting. And that is when we talk about the Pirkei Avos, we know it's a Masechta and Shas like all the other Masechtas. It's a Masechta. And if you look in the Seder that Pirkei Avos is arranged in, we know that Pirkei Avos can be found in Seder Nezikin. Now Nezikin talks about the laws of damages, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, torts, all the civil laws, all the criminal laws, and so forth. And it's at first glance it seems a bit strange why Pirkei Avos should be put in Seder Nezikin. After all, it's not really discussing the laws of damages at all. It's talking about moral and ethical modes of behavior. It has really nothing to do with Nezikin. And first we come to the comments of Rav Ruvain Margolis. Very interesting. Rav Ruvain Margolis, he has a number of amazing farm. He has a sefer called Yesod HaMishnah V'Arichasa, which talks about the compilation of the Mishnah. And that sefer I happen to have. And he also has a sefer of Chidushim on Shas called Nitzutzei. Now the Nitzutzei I did not have yesterday, at least in the morning. So I was thinking, where did I see the sefer Nitzutzei? Where can I get my hands on the sefer Nitzutzei? So I couldn't find it in the Chafetz Chaim library, or in the Landers library, or in Gift World, or in Safra. And then I told them in Safra, could you get me Nitzutzei? And they said, yeah, we'll order it for you. I said, when is it going to be here? Figuring it'll be there in a couple of days. They said, 2 o'clock. I said, great, I'll leave a space in my Marmakaimos, and I'll come back, I'll buy the sefer. So Baruch Hashem, I was able to get same-day service. So the Rav Ruvain Margolis writes, amazing thing. He writes, based on the Gemara, in a number of places, for instance in Masechta Brachos, Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, it says like this, that many of the students in the times of the Mishnah, they learned Seder Nezikin. For example, the Gemara tells us, Bekulei Shenuyei Rav Yehuda, they learned Seder Nezikin. And also it says in Bava Basra, Kuf Ayin Hey Amud Beis, it says Kol Haroitze Lahachkim Yasik B'Dinei Mamanos. If you want to become smart, you want to train your brain to think sharply and analytically, learn the laws of Mamanos, learn Seder Nezikin. So it was a historical fact that many Talmidim only learned Seder Nezikin. And therefore, to give the Talmidim a balanced educational approach, to sort of make a complete body of information for the students, the Chachamim put Pirkei Avos in Nezikin to ensure that at least when a kid walks out of the yeshiva after learning Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, he would also get some Musar along with it by learning Pirkei Avos. So according to Rav Ruvain Margolis, Pirkei Avos was intentionally placed in Seder Nezikin so that the Talmud, eventually after he leaves his years in the yeshiva, at least he'll get a balanced diet in terms of his body of Jewish information. And Rav Ruvain Margolis confirms this approach with the fact that Idios, Masechta Idios, is also in Seder Nezikin. Rabbi said, what's Sefer Idios? Sefer Masechta Idios is a number of topics of halacha that have nothing to do with the laws of damages. In fact, there's something unique about Masechta Idios that no other Masechta has, and that is, there's no machlokes in Masechta Idios. The Shas calls Idios Bechirasa, the choicest Masechta, because the tradition of the halachas and Idios were so pristine and so crystal clear that there was no machlokes about it. And the Chachmei HaTalmud and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi felt that it was important to put Idios in Nezikin. Why? Again, because the Talmidim often would only learn Seder Nezikin. And at least by the time they would come out of yeshiva, they would have, a more balanced body of knowledge, and therefore they intentionally injected Pirkei Avos and Idios into Seder Nezikin. Let's take a look at number 2. and from the Sefer Nitzitzei Ara of Rav Reuben Margolis. This is in his comments to Masechta Idyois. He writes, Besifri Yisod HaMishnah V'Arichasa, in my Sefer, entitled Yisod HaMishnah V'Arichasa, Hezbarti, I explained that Sharsidar Rabbeinu HaKadosh Masechta Idyois V'Avos B'Seder Nezikin. The reason why Rabbi put Pirkei Avos and Idyois in Nezikin, even though it has absolutely no connection whatsoever to Nezikin, the Yitachein, it's very plausible. Kizehu Laman Yomad Oisan Kol Tamid. This is in order for every student to learn it. Leida Hilchos Bechirasa, in order to learn what we call the choice halachos, the Hishtalshalos HaTorah. And after learning Idyois, which are the choice halachos, it talks about what? What does Pirkei Avos begin with? The basis of our Amunah. What's the basis of our Amunah? The tradition, the Messiah, the chain. Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Shabapel Yachad im Hestabkos v'midos Tovos. Also getting a good dose of some Musar. So the Rebbe was a smart man. He knew the Talmidim were learning Nezikin. He wanted to stick in the chain of the Messiah. He wanted to stick in the Midos Tovos, and he wanted to stick in the halachos of Masechta Idyois, which are what we call Bechirasa. Right? Like Lashar.
Why wouldn't we start with that? Wouldn't that be rather to end off after we learned all of Machlokas and
because he's very smart. If he's going to start with Pirkei Avos, no one's going to open up the whole Seder. Right? So he wants to slip it in. He wants to slip it in. After you get some good lumdus under your belt, you say, okay, I might as well finish, right? Like if you look in the Gemara Brachos, or if you look in the Gemara Baba Basra, where it says, okay. So far what we're learning is that Pirkei Avos, where is its location? Seder Nezikin. How about in terms of where in Seder Nezikin it's located? If you look in Nezikin, it's located after Sanhedrin and Makos. Right? Why after Sanhedrin and Makos?
Isn't that at the end? Oh, not in the end, in the middle?
No, after Sanhedrin and Makos. Right? Why? And right before, sandwiched in between Sanhedrin and Makos, and followed by Horios. So the Rambam, in his Perish HaMishnayos, tells us a little different than Rav Reuben Margolis. And the Rambam tells us that it's not that Pirkei Avos was shtupt into Nezikin. Pirkei Avos was specifically placed between, right after Sanhedrin and Makos. Why? Number one, because you're going to look at your Dayan. You're going to look at your leader, at your rabbi, at your Rav. And you're going to say, this guy's a joke. How does he compare to Hillel, to Shammai? How does he compare to Moshe? How does he compare to Shmuel? So Pirkei Avos begins, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. So that, when you look at your rabbi, don't look at him as his own individual personality. Because if you look at him as an individual by himself, he may actually indeed be unworthy of your admiration and respect. But you need to look at him in terms of what he represents. And what he represents is the next link in the chain of the Messiah. So as unworthy as he may be compared to previous generations, nevertheless he's playing a pivotal role. And the role is Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, Umasar Yeshua, Yeshua Zakanim, and so forth. That is the first explanation of the Rambam. The second explanation of the Rambam, if you take a look on your sheets, it's number 6. It's the 6th line in number 3. The second reason why Avos appears over here, Shehu Roitza Lizkar b'Masechtazu Musar Kol Chacham min HaChachamim, wants to mention the ethical teachings of all the various sages, Kedei Shenilman Mehem Hamidos HaTovos, in order to be able to learn good character. Says the Rambam, who needs to learn good character? More than the layman, the leader, the Dayan, the Talmud Chacham needs to learn good character. Why? Says the Rambam, if an Am Haaretz is going to display bad character and is going to act improperly, and is not going to act with proper manners and etiquette, yes, it's improper, but who's he going to harm? He may harm his friend, he may harm his neighbor, he may harm his immediate family, but the damage will be limited, right? The damage is not to the public. Ela lebalav bilvad. Abel hashoifet. But if you have a rabbi, kishlo yiyah musar, if he's not going to act with good character, utsanua, if he's not going to be modest and ethical, yazik atzmai v'yazik levnei adam, he's a public hazard. He's a public hazard. He's a hazard to the tzibur. So therefore, after speaking about Sanhedrin and Makos, which are the laws for the Dayanim, the Mishnah and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi specifically is giving ethical admonition to who? To the Dayan. Because otherwise he's a public bar, he's a bar b'Reshus HaRabim. The same way you can't dig a pit in the Reshus HaRabim, if you're going to be a Talmid Chacham without good character, there is no greater bar b'Reshus HaRabim than that. That's why Pirkei Avos follows immediately after Masechta Sanhedrin and Makos. And by the way, if you look in the Rambam in number 4, in his introduction to Masechta Harios follows Avos. Why? Because very, very important. After it tells you all the ethical behavior that the Dayan has to have, right? Tells you the Dayan has to be patient, have a Masuna Madin, have a Makabas Kadim Nesever Panim Yafos. Now the Dayan may think, I know all the halachos, right? I learned Sanhedrin. I know all the Musar, I'm a nice guy. So now I'm perfect. Now, I have the whole package. I know halacha, and I'm a good guy too. So why do we follow Masechta Harios? What is Masechta Harios about? Mistakes. In other words, no. You're going to still make mistakes. You can know all the halachas of Sanhedrin. You can know all the ethical behavior. You're still not perfect. You still need to learn Harios, what to do in case you make an error. Says the Rambam, Kasher Hishlam, Musar Hadayonim. Once we finished completing the Musar that we need to give to the judges and the Dayanim, so Heichel Avar Shkiyusam, we begin to speak about what to do if they made a mistake. Ki kol mi sheyesh b'teva basav adam, anyone who's born of a woman, anyone who is flesh and blood, it's impossible they won't make a mistake. So, as a Reuben Margolis says, Avos is where? In the Zikin. Why? We want the Talmidim to learn it. The Rambam understands even more. It's not just in the Zikin, it's perfectly positioned between Sanhedrin and Makos, the laws of Dayanim, because this Musar, as important it is for everyone, it's exceptionally important for who? For the Dayanim. Okay? So that, Rabbi Say, that is the first topic we're going to look into this morning on Pirkei Avos. That's the introduction to Pirkei Avos. Now, let's begin Mishnah Aleph. And of course, we're all familiar that Mishnah Aleph begins, what? Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from Har Sinai. Umasar li Yoshua. He gave it over to Yoshua. V'Yeshua leZakenim. U'Zakenim leNeviim. U'Neviim Masaru la'Anshe Knesses Hagdolah. Okay, Pirkei Avos begins with the chain of Masaira, with the tradition, with the Shalshelas HaMasaira. Okay, very interesting. And if you ask me, that has absolutely nothing at all to do with Pirkei Avos. The Masaira? I mean, Kol HaTorah Kula was Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. We could just as easily have begun Baba Kama, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. What, Baba Kama is not Misinai? I mean, any Masechta you could begin Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. After all the laws of Nezikin, of Nashim, of Azram, of Moshe received them from Har Sinai. Why specifically Pirkei Avos would Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi begin Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai? If anything, I would think that Pirkei Avos is less to do with Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai than any of the other Masechtas. After all, who could make up a halacha that, who would know on their own that if a shard gores one time, you pay half damages, and if it gores 3 times, you pay full damages? I mean, that's clearly Misinai. Who would know anything about the laws of Saita? But I would know on my own that if I meet you on the street, I should smile to you. Right? I need a Messiah for that. I need a Messiah to tell me, I know on my own, if I don't take out the garbage now, it's just going to build up, and my whole house is going to be full of it. I need a tradition for Pirkei Avos, and yet, even though Pirkei Avos is the last Masechta that you would think it's important to know, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, it's the only Masechta that begins that way. And there's a very famous comment of the Bar Tanura, and the Bar Tanura says like this. Look at number 2. Omer Ani, says the Bar Tanura, I say, Lefisha Masechta zu eina miyusedes al pirush mitzvah me mitzvahs haTorah. This Masechta is not founded to explain one of the particular mitzvahs in the Torah, kishar Masechtas sheba Mishnah, like the other Masechtas in the Mishnah. Ela kula musarim umidais. It's a book of ethics. It's a book of moral behavior. V'chachmei umayis ha'olam gam kein chibru sfarim. All the sages of the various nations in the world also compiled books of how to act, right? The 7 habits of highly successful people, of highly successful teenagers, right? How to win friends and influence people, right? Every nation in the world wrote books of behavior, right? George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, right? Every single nation, Confucius, every nation has sages that wrote books of behavior. Where did they get this behavior from? Kamoisha badu milibam. They made it up. They made up laws of behavior. The reason why the Tana begins this Masechta, Moshe Kibel Tar Sinai, is don't say Hillel woke up in the morning and he said, Emeina Mili Mili. You know, it's a catchy maxim, and Hillel knew that Avram Fried would have a couple of good songs for it. So he woke up in the morning, he said, Ameina Nili Nili. And someone else woke up in the morning and he said, Lefum Tzara Agra. And another guy woke up in the morning and he said, Havim Kalos called him Meseir Panim Yafis. No! Nobody woke up in the morning and thought anything. These are traditions that they had that date back to Har Sinai. It comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom itself. None of the midos mentioned in Pirkei Avos were good forms of behavior that they learned from experience or they learned from traveling through life. No, none of it. The same way, Shar Shanagachas Hashar is Chatzi Nevek, that's Misinai. Have a Makabos Kol Adam B'Sever Panim Yafos is Misinai. None of the Tanaim made up. Nobody made anything up over here. This is Misinai. Af Elu Nemru B'Sinai. Now let's just clarify. What does it mean that these midos are Misinai? Does that mean they had a tradition from one generation to the next generation that there are certain forms of behavior they should have? So if you look in the Vilna Gaon's commentary to Pirkei Avos, every single Mishnah, the Vilna Gaon says, have a Mesunim Badin, Shanemar, he quotes a pasuk. Have Makavas called him Sefer Panim Yafos, he quotes a pasuk. And on every single Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the Vilna Gaon finds the pasuk in Tanakh where this behavior is derived from. Why? Why is the Gra doing this? To explain that every form of behavior mentioned in Pirkei Avos is Misinai. It's all traces back to the Tanakh. It all traces back to the Chumash. That's what we have over here in number 3 from the Aliyos Eliyahu. Bereishis Perushay Alavos. At the beginning of the Gra's commentary on Pirkei Avos, Tziein Hagoyin B'Ksav Yad Kodshay. The Vilna Gaon points out for us in his holy writing, Shalachein Nikreis HaMasechta Avos. Why is Pirkei Avos called Avos? You know why? If you look in the beginning of Baba Kama, or in the Gemara in Shabbos, the Gemara says like this: whatever is written in the Chumash is called Avos, right? Let's say about the Malachos. Whatever is in the Chumash is called Avos. Whatever Malachos, whatever Nezikin are in the Chumash are called Avos. The reason why Pirkei Avos is called Avos, you know why? Because you could find the source for every Mishnah in the Chumash itself, in the Nevi'im itself. That's why it's called Avos. And in other words, what we're learning is that everything we learn in Pirkei Avos is not some kind of nice form of behavior.
Avos refers to the Torah,
itself.
Or the Eibishter?
The Torah, the Chumash.
Who's the Av?
The Chumash itself. The Chumash itself.
Are called Avos?
Yeah, like the Gemara says in Baba Kama. Right? We have Avos Nezikin and Toldos Nezikin. What are the Avos? Baraz and Av. Why? Because it's Kasav B'Kra. The Malachos, the Lamites Malachos are called Avos. Why? They're alluded to in the Psukim. The Toldos are not alluded to in the Psukim. So the Gra feels that Pirkei Avos is called Avos because every single Mishnah finds its source in the Chumash. So what we think, Pirkei Avos, let's teach it to our children. It's good manners. It's good etiquette. There's no such thing. There is no such thing. If the etiquette is founded in the Torah, it has value. If the etiquette is not found in the Torah, it doesn't have value. And we'll see what we mean by that. I'll give you a very clear example of what we're saying. The Gemara Masechta Sanhedrin tells us a story about Rabbi Gamliel. Ram Gamliel told his attendant, tomorrow I want to be Mekadesh the Chodesh, gather for me 7 Zakenim, bring them up to the attic, and we're going to be Mekadesh the Levana. So he comes up in the morning, and there are 8 Zakenim, there are 8 Chachamim in the attic. So Gamliel says, who came up here without Rishus? So the Gemara says, Shmuel HaKatan got up, and he said, I'm the guy, I came out without Rishus, I'm not here to be a member of the court, I'm just coming to watch the proceedings. Fine. Why did Shmuel HaKatan do this? Because he didn't want to embarrass the guy who came uninvited. And then the Gemara says, really it wasn't Shmuel HaKatan, but he was trying to protect from shame the guy who came in uninvited. Like what happened in the times of Rabbi. Rabbi was once giving a shir, and there was a guy in the shir with bad breath. So we would say to let the Rabbi, cut the guy some slack. Why are you calling the guy out? No. This guy had such bad breath. He had apparently eaten garlic, and he had such bad breath, Rabbi made an announcement, whoever ate garlic, get up and leave now. Right? Imagine that. Imagine, in the middle of a shir, there are 100 people there, and the rabbi gets up at the podium and said, by the way, I can't take it anymore. Could the guy who had the garlic please, stand up and leave? So what happened? Reb Chia got up, and he left. So everyone followed Reb Chia. So the whole shir walked out. In the morning, Rabbi's son, Reb Shimon, found Reb Chia, and he said, are you the guy who caused my father distress? He said, no, it wasn't me. But I didn't want to embarrass the guy whose job it was. So I took the slack, I took it on my shoulders, and this way I knew everyone would follow me and nobody would be embarrassed. And the Gemara asks, where did Reb Chia learn this from? That you should take the blame yourself and you shouldn't embarrass your friend? Says the Gemara, he learned it from Reb Meir. Because one time when Reb Meir was giving shir, listen to this one. A woman walks into the base medrash.
Why do we ask it this way? Why do we ask on Rabbi Gamliel? How could you embarrass somebody like that? Who's here who's not invited?
It's because now got Ram Gamliel.
He's Rabbi Gamliel. He was the Nasi, right? How could he say to somebody, who's here who's not invited?
Yeah, well, we find in many instances, Ram Gamliel.
Whoever has bad breath, get out.
Ram Gamliel had a certain approach, and that was Nahag Nesiyascha Barama. He carried a big stick.
He obviously didn't learn Pirkei Avos.
In terms of preserving the halacha, his job was he had to preserve the authenticity of the halachic process. Listen, so the Gemara asks, where did he get it from? He got it from Reb Meir. Why? Because a woman once came into the base medrash. She said, one of you guys here was makadesh me with bia. So whoever it was, either seal the deal, either do the nesuin, or give me a get. So imagine the embarrassment. The guy was, yeah, it was me. Yeah, I did it. No, so the Gemara says, you know what happened? Reb Meir wrote a get to this woman, and they all followed suit, and they wrote a get to this woman. Then the Gemara asks, where did Reb Meir learn it from? Reb Meir learned from Shmuel HaKatan. And where did Shmuel HaKatan learn it from? Shechania ben Yechiel. And where did Shechania ben Yechiel learn it from? He learned it from Yeshua ben Nun. And the question is, Rabbi Sai, what do you mean where he learned it from? Why do you have to learn it from anyone? They're just being a nice guy. Wow, you can't be a nice guy? Isn't that the right thing? Be a good guy, be a nice guy, show good manners, avoid embarrassing someone. No. If you don't have a tradition from the Torah that you should embarrass yourself to spare someone else from embarrassment, you're not allowed to do it. There is no such thing as be a good sport, be a good guy. Either there's a tradition from the Torah or there's no tradition. If Pirkei Avos would not begin Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, all these forms of behavior, as nice as they sound, as good as they sound, as sweet as they sound, you couldn't do them. So the question is, why not? Why not? Fine. What we're learning is that you need to have a tradition even in terms of manners and etiquette. Why? Why? Why do you have to have a tradition? You're not hurting anyone. You're not harming anyone. So we come to a very amazing thing. We know in Sefer Devarim we have a lav of Baal Tosef and Baal Tigra. You can't add on to the Torah, you can't detract from the Torah. The thing is, the Torah says this lav 2 times. The Torah says the lav in V'aschanan, Parak Daled Pasuk Beis, it says, Lo yisosifu al hadavar shanochi mitzaveh eschem v'lo yisigru mimenu, don't add on, don't take away. And then again in Parshas Re'eh, you know what else it says? Eis kol hadavar asher anochi mitzava eschem oisoi sishmur lasos. Whatever I commanded you, do. Loisoi seif, v'loi sigra. Don't add and don't detract. Okay. So what's the question? Why does the Torah have to repeat the same exact lav twice? In V'aschanan and in Re'eh. It's the same lav. So if you look in the Rambam, in Hilchos Mamrim, Perek Beis Halacha Tes, it talks about the power of Bezdin. And it says, Bezdin has the authority to make decrees and to prohibit something which is really permitted, and to make asur something which is, right, mutter, or they could permit something which is asur lefisha. If Bezdin has the need to say, you know what, we don't like the fact that the kosher stores are going, the prices are too expensive. For 1 week, Bezdin could say you could eat treif meat. So Bezdin has authority anytime to asur something which is permitted, and has a hirasha to permit something which is prohibited. However, they cannot do it on a permanent basis. From there, how do we know they can't do it on a permanent basis? Because the Torah says, "Lo soisef alav v'lo sigra mimenu." Don't add and don't detract. So Baruch Hashem, today we have a lot of Talmidim from Landers, because they heard I'm going to quote from Rabbi Sachs' Sefer on Pirkei Avos. In the Sefer Yemei Tamimin, Rabbi Sachs points out that we learned from the Rambam that what? How did you know? Right? That we learned from the Rambam that the lav in Re'eh of Lo Soisef Lo Sigra is not a repetition of what it says in V'aschanan. It's a new lav. You know who the lav is on? It's a lav on Bezdin. In other words, in V'aschanan it says Lo Soisef Lo Soisifu Lo Sigru Lashon Rabim. It's going on every individual Jew. Right? I'm not to invent a new mitzvah, right? Let's say I said, you know what, besides talis and tefillin, when you daven shacharis, you should, balance a water bottle on your head. Not to do that. It's adding on to the Torah. But besides the individual, the Torah gives a special lav to Bezdin that they can add or detract on a permanent measure. So in other words, the Rambam will learn that Re'eh is not a repetition of V'aschanan. V'aschanan is a lav to the individual. Re'eh is a lav to Bezdin. Okay. However, that's what the Rambam learns. What does the Vilna Gaon say? The Vilna Gaon points out that B'chlal it's not a repetition. The lav in V'aschanan is like this. Look at number 9. The Vilna Gaon writes, Perush, Lahaisif al gufa de mitzvah. To add on to the main body of the mitzvah. Kamay alula v'tzitzis la yivchais me'arba v'la yosef al arba. Mikan amru la yosef matana achas al matan arba v'la al matan achas es kol hadavar. Shla yosef kain afilu dibur echra berchas chayanim. Says the Vilna Gaon like this. The lav in V'aschanan of don't add and don't take away is don't make a 614th mitzvah. Don't make a mitzvah besides, the 613. Don't balance a water bottle on your head. Don't add on a new mitzvah. The lav in Re'eh is don't add on to the mitzvahs themselves. In other words, you want to add a 5th parsha to the tefillin. You want to add a new, besides the 4 minim, and you know what? Also take a cantaloupe. So that's not inventing a new mitzvah, that's adding on to the existing mitzvah. In other words, V'aschanan...
A tolda is not an add-on?
In other words, like this. V'aschanan is saying, don't invent a new mitzvah, nothing to do with the 613. And Re'eh is saying, don't take the mitzvahs we have and say, in the mezuzah, besides, those parshios, put in parak shira. Or the 4 species, besides the daled minim, carry with you, an avocado. No. So one lav is don't invent a new mitzvah, and one lav is don't tamper with the pre-existing mitzvahs.
Does that also the mezuzah? Does the mezuzah take a parsha?
You're over a lav. Does it pass the mezuzah?
Does it pass the mezuzah? No, is a mezuzah kosher mezuzah is like...
I'm not sure. I don't know.
What about chelas?
Chelas?
Chelas is you're adding on.
The Torah says that you should have blue wool. I mean, nowadays?
Yeah.
That's a hot issue. Okay.
We have told us of the Lam Tes.
Vilna Gaon writes, we won't have chelas until Mashiach comes.
Told us of the Lam Tes Malachas. That's not an add-on?
No, it's derived from the Torah itself. It's just not explicitly written.
There's a fine line then between an add-on and a derivation.
Yeah, you have to.
Which is derivation, which is an add-on.
You have to know Shas. You have to know what we learn out. But Rabbi said, here's what I'm coming to. There's a third difference between the Loisaisifan and V'aschanan and the Loisaisifan Re'eh. And that is from Rabbi Isaac Shar. Rabbi Isaac Shar, who was the son-in-law of the author of Slabodka and later the Rosh Hashiva of Slabodka, he says like this. Look at number 10 in the second paragraph in the Sefer Leket Sichos Musaf V'yesh Lahavin. Haloi lavzeh shal loy soisifu v'loy sigru mimenu nemar kfar le'el. We already said the lav of loy soisifu in V'aschanan. So says Rabbi Isaac Shar v'yamarti. In V'aschanan the Torah is saying don't add on mitzvahs. Because beforehand it says loy soisifu ala davar shanoich mitzvah v'aschamayim. V'aschanan is saying don't invent mitzvahs. But you know what Re'eh is telling me? Don't add manners, etiquette. Don't invent modes of behavior that you think are important. Even if you're not saying it's a mitzvah. If you're acting a certain way because you want to be a nice guy, why? Because I think it's the right thing to do. It's a lav in the Torah of Lo Seisif. What do you mean you think? Who are you to think what the right thing is? Listen to this. Aval kan he toisif iser bal toisif al hargeshim b'inyanei avoda. The Torah here is telling us, don't add feelings. Lo rak b'maisim mitzvos haTorah hashira shelo yidro shadas eich hagoyim mechabden ashikutzem ba'ibdem maisim al pi sichlam k'nei lasis kanam mechabdes Hashem. Not only in action, the Torah is warning us, don't look at the way goyim behave and say, well, they think this is a nice thing to do. I'm also going to act that way. What the Torah is warning us to do is, don't follow your own intellect. Had Pirkei Avos not said, Moshe kibam Torah mi Sinai, then we would have no right to smile at someone. Why am I smiling at the guy? Because I think it's the right thing to do? What do you mean you think it's the right thing to do? Is this something that God has transmitted to the Jewish people, a form of behavior? It is. It is a form of behavior. Now, part of Pirkei Avos is that, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, how should a person act? That kol shehi tiferes b'nei adam, anything which is glorious to other people. Meaning, part of Pirkei Avos is we should act in a way that people, to show respect to people, and to show honor to people, and to show manners, and to show etiquette. But the only reason we're authorized to do so is because that's our tradition. If it wouldn't be our tradition, it would be a violation of loy toisef. It would be an isur d'oraisa. In other words, we're not coming to say that manners are improper. They're very proper. They're required. But they're only required because that's our Messiah. But if a person wants to have good manners and act in a certain way because, let's say, Goyim do it, or because they think it's proper, it's a lav in the Torah, Lo Seisif. So that's how...
Free will. If I want to act this way and I'm not doing anything that's negative.
There's no such thing as free will. Free will means you could choose to do the wrong thing. But
if I choose to change my mode of behavior, and doesn't adversely impact someone, but it may be different than what the Torah said, I can't do it? No.
What do you mean? Let's say a person says, you know what? Besides the Torah, I think it's very important. I feel it's very important to
I want to get up early. More than 20%.
Not allowed to.
The limit.
You're not allowed to. Why? Because you want to be a good guy? Yeah. Not allowed to. Not allowed to.
That's not Bechira Chavshis?
You have the Bechira Chavshis to either follow the laws of the Torah or to go against the Torah. Okay, so this is a very challenging idea. And the idea is Pirkei Avos begins Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. Why? Why? Because if it would not be Misinai, we would not be authorized just to follow good forms of behavior. It would be Loi Taisif. But let's add one more specific thing. And that is the comment of the Tfaras Yisrael. And that's really based on a very interesting story. In 1937, so Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yimkam Damai, was invited to the seminar in Berlin, the rabbinical seminar in Berlin, to give an address to the students. And Rabbi Chanan had certain issues with what was being taught in this seminar, a certain secular knowledge that Rabbi Chanan was not for. But in any event, he was invited to address the students, and he was introduced by Rabbi Chil Yaakov Weinberg. So Rabbi Chanan gets up to speak, and Rabbi Chil Yaakov Weinberg, he jumps up, and he makes the following bracha: Baruch Ata Hashem L'keinu Melchaylam Shechalak Michvaydai Liyireyav Shechalak Michachmasei Liyireyav, which is a bracha you make on the Gadol Hadar. So Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg made that bracha on Rabbi Chanan with Shem U'Malchus. And Rabbi Chanan gets up to speak, and he tells the Talmidim the following. He says, Avram Avinu came to Avimelech, to the Plishtim, right? Think about, where did the Plishtim come from? The Philistines were descendants of the original Greeks, so they're very cultured people, very technologically advanced people. They're people who had culture, arts, very sophisticated. And what happens? Avimelech sees Sarah, he takes Sarah. That night, God comes to Avimelech, he says, what are you doing? She's a married woman. So Avimelech comes to Avram in the morning, he said, why didn't you tell me she was married? What, you thought we would kill you? Why didn't you say something? And what did Avram Avinu say? Vayomer Avraham, look at number 13. Ki amarti, because I said, Rak ein yiras Elokim ba'makom hazeh. There ain't no fear of God in this place. V'haraguni al dvar ishti, and you would kill me for my wife. Take a look at the Malbim. Malbim says an amazing thing. Haidi aloi. What Abraham is telling Avimelech, Shegam im nira ish ayam. Even if you see a man or a nation, shehu philosoph gadol, you could have a guy who's a great theologian, bechak akalei nimusim yisharim, and he has carved out just laws. The hirgalas atzman, the midas tavis, and you see an individual, he acts with great manners and with great dignity and with great courtesy, based on what his own mind has invented. And he seems to be very just. You see a guy, he's ethical, he's moral, he's upright, he deals with justice. You should know, says the Malbim, this man can be a murderer. Have no trust in this guy. Why not? That any time his appetite is aroused to do something wrong, don't think his intellect will have any power. Because in a split second, as soon as his taiva is alarmed, he will go after a beautiful woman, or his friend's money. His intellect will go wild. If you see a man and you ask him, why do you behave with such justice? And you seem to be so ethical and so moral. If the guy says, that's the way I was born, I think this is the right way to behave, you should know this man will be a murderer and adulterer. What do you mean? He's so just, he's so ethical, he's so moral. Says the Malbim, if his morals come from his own mind, they stand no chance against his taiva. There's only one. What? So a guy who keeps a guy who keeps Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, but he doesn't believe they are given from God, he's Chayiv Misa. He's Chayiv Misa. Says the Malbim, there is only one force in the human being that keeps a person in check, and that is fear of God, Yirah Shamayim. So Avraham Avinu says, and this is what Rabbi Chanan said, what did Avraham mean? Rak ein yiras Elokim. But there is not only, right, this double negative. You know what Avraham Avinu meant? He said like this, I came to the Philistines, and I saw so many wonderful things. I saw art, I saw music, I saw culture, I saw sculpture, I saw every technology, a sophisticated people. There's only missing one thing. They don't believe in God. And if they don't believe in God, you're a bunch of murderers. And I cannot tell you who this woman is. And it's an amazing thing. Rabbi Chanan said this in Berlin in 1937. And who could have realized how his address, how prophetic it was. How one moment these butchers would sit in their drawing rooms listening to Mozart and Beethoven, and the next moment they would go out and bury millions of Jews, burning them alive. Why? What happened to all their morals, all their ethics, all of their modes of behavior? What happened to their culture? The answer is, Rak ein yiras Elokim b'makom hazeh. If a person acts with morality, and a person claims to be ethical, if it's not from a divine source, it is worthless. It's worthless. Why is it worthless? Because it stands no chance against taiva. As intellectual as a person may be, and as ethical as a person may be, but if they see a woman, or they want money, all their ethics and morals go down the drain. And therefore, says it's Faris Yisrael, Pirkei Avos, which is a book of morals and ethics, you know what it has to begin with? Where does it come from? Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Because if these modes of behavior are not divinely, do not originate in the divine, it's all worthless. So if you see someone who claims to say, you know what, I'm not religious, but I'm a moral person, I'm an ethical person, you should know it's worthless. And the greatest proof is Moshe Rabbeinu. He comes down from Har Sinai, and he sees Klal Yisrael is worshipping the golden calf. And what does he do? He's holding in one hand one tablet, mitzvos ben adam lamakon. Another tablet, mitzvos ben adam lachaveroi. And he sees Klal Yisrael worshipping the Egel. He breaks both tablets. Why would he break both tablets? Just break the first one, ben adam lamakon. The Jewish people are not violating any ethical, moral behavior. They're just violating ben adam lamakon. But he broke the whole thing. Why? Because if you don't have ben adam lamakon, ben adam lachaveroi has no value whatsoever. It's a fake, it's a phony, it's a fraud. And that's why Pirkei Avos has to begin, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai, because without that introduction, the ethical...
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.